The room had not been opened in years. Light stayed outside the doorway like it feared crossing the threshold. Dust settled across every surface with the patience of time itself, thick enough to soften edges and blur memory. The air tasted of metal, faint rust, and paper sealed too long against the world. It was not loud, not dramatic, just still, a silence that studied whoever entered. The investigator paused at the frame, letting the quiet reclaim him. He remembered this place exactly as it had been left, every item positioned with intent, every drawer closed but never truly at rest. It felt like stepping into a photo that had stopped aging. She had stood near the center once, the victim, Lyra Hammond, age 28, musician by passion, archivist by necessity. A woman with an unusual voice and a slow smile that lived longer in memory than in presence. The room had been her workspace inside a downtown library branch, tucked between two archival bays, locked each night like something precious. Lyra's handwriting still graced the logs, precise, rounded, calm. Nothing chaotic, nothing frantic, just order. The investigator walked into that order now, boots soundless on the tiled floor, though he wasn't trying for silence. He had been younger when he first stepped inside, untested, certain the world could be solved if you simply placed enough facts in a line. Now he moved with a caution that had no fear in it, only respect, as if approaching a set of still figures in an old photograph. Evidence, yes, but also absence. He did not touch anything yet. He let the room breathe again. A locker stood in the far corner, half-shadowed. Its paint had faded in long vertical lines, as though light had fallen differently over the years. He remembered that locker and the item it once held, the cause of the sealed room, the start of the unanswered file. Lyra had curated hundreds of historical items, cataloging, labeling, storing them with discipline. But that locker was different. Unlisted, unmarked, a blank page in a world of ordered ink. He approached it slowly. The smell of paper intensified, almost brittle. A thin layer of dust lifted in a quiet gesture as he opened the door. The hinge protested only slightly, not loud, just a whisper of metal remembering motion. Inside lay exactly what had been left 2 decades earlier. A single portfolio wrapped in canvas, tied with twine that had loosened but not broken. Beside it sat a brass key, untouched, its surface dulled into warm gold. He set the key on the table without comment. His gloved hands worked the twine free. The portfolio opened with a faint exhale of loosened air. Photographs stared up at him, their edges softened, their blacks and whites leaning toward sepia. Lyra herself appeared in one frame, not posed, but candid, half-turned toward an unseen person. The image captured her mid-thought, eyes half-lowered, expression impossible to categorize. She looked aware yet unaware, grounded yet distant. The investigator studied that expression longer than he intended. It held no alarm, no clear invitation, just quiet. A person comfortable in the presence of someone she trusted. That detail, small and unassuming, had been noted in the original file but never explored. Trust. That was the hinge the entire case had swung upon. He set the photo aside and browsed the next. A series of archival shelves, catalog slips, fragments of text dating back to 1912. A building ledger, a donor list, a musical score noted in Lyra's neat ink, margin comments marking tonal variations and missing bars. She had loved music more than her own biography. Lyra played violin in quiet bars after hours, performing for small audiences who spoke softly so they would not overwhelm her notes. He turned another page, a typed memo, a signature smudged but readable, L. Hammond. The memo referenced a set of documents she had recently uncovered in the basement storage wing, unnamed donor, unidentified acquisition, date missing. She had been scheduled to present a report, but it had never materialized. That was the last official trace of her work. The investigator inhaled, letting the scent of old ink and cellulose anchor him. This room was more than archive. It was testimony left without speech. He paused not because he doubted his work, but because every object here felt alive. Not haunting, simply waiting. He found a slim audio cassette in a labeled folder. The label, handwritten, personal notes, do not file. The handwriting remained round, steady, even in that informal line. He set the tape in the old player mounted to the desk. A soft click, a static bloom, then Lyra's voice, calm, clear, unhurried. Entry continues. I believe the item predates its label. The notation style is unlike anything in the collection. It does not belong to our donor list. I haven't verified yet. I want to. It feels important. A pause, paper rustled. She continued, voice steady but thoughtful. I'll keep it in the locker until I understand what exactly I'm holding. I'll speak with him about it tomorrow. Him, the only pronoun she used, no name. Lyra cleared her throat on the recording and spoke again, almost to herself. It isn't the object that interests me, it's the way it was delivered. No signature, no request for cataloging, just left, like a gesture without acknowledgement. The tape ended on a soft click. No second side, no follow-up entry, no elaboration. Only that simple clue, delivered anonymously, never filed. Trust, again, she had someone she intended to speak to, someone not yet on record. He shut off the device and sat still in the room, letting her words settle in the dust and late light. His gaze moved to the brass key. It had unlocked something then, but not the locker that had always been accessible. The key belonged to the storage wing, lower level. He remembered the report. She had requested access the day before her final archival visit. He picked up the key and held it between thumb and forefinger. Its weight was modest but symbolic, a small, ordinary object holding quiet certainty. It fit into only one lock in the building, the cabinet room containing unindexed artifacts awaiting review. That cabinet had been reorganized multiple times over the years, yet one drawer remained sealed, its contents logged but never opened. He returned the photographs to the portfolio except for the candid of Lyra. That stayed in his hand as he surveyed the space again. Dust motes drifted like faint threads, catching in the slice of hallway light. Time itself seemed to hover, uncommitted to moving forward. He found her notebook next, leather-bound, worn at the edges, elastic band loose. The final pages contained sketches rather than text, a key shape drawn repeatedly, then a locker diagram, then a violin. The drawings were minimal, deliberate, nothing rushed. Lyra had not worked in panic, she had worked in meaning. He traced the lines without touching the paper. The violin sketch included 4 numbers at the bottom, 7123, not dates, not catalog numbers, a sequence. He checked the locker. Its internal racks were numbered 7, 1, 2, 3 in that exact vertical order. The sequence indicated placement, hidden in plain view. He returned to the locker and lifted shelf 3, fingers careful, movement controlled. Beneath it sat a sealed envelope, thin but weighted by something more than paper. The flap was unbroken. He set it on the table before opening it with the patience of someone unsealing a decade of breath. Inside lay a single letter typed. No greeting, no attribution, just one sentence. Items of shared history are not meant to be divided. The line resonated differently now than when first recovered. Then it had felt cryptic. Today it felt logical, not dramatic, just final. Lyra had been concerned not with possession but with provenance. Someone else had claimed connection to the artifact, someone she trusted enough to discuss privately. He folded the letter back into its envelope. He did not attempt to search for sentiment beyond its text. The facts were enough, they always had been. But the silent weight in the room pressed forward. This was not a story of disappearance, not a story of conflict, but a story of two people sharing something historical and private, with the archive acting as witness. He looked again at Lyra's face in the photograph, candid, mid-thought, at ease. The trust implied there was the quiet hinge of everything. He closed the portfolio, set it back, and let the room return to stillness. His own reflection in the black locker door looked older, not tired but tempered. Justice, if that word applied, was not a bright flame but a slow ledger entry, dates aligned, signatures verified, silence respected. He stood in that silence a moment longer. Outside, the hallway waited with its ordinary light and sterile walls. In here, Lyra remained, not frozen, not gone, simply present in paper, key, ink, dust. As he left, he turned once at the doorframe. Not to fix the past, not to rewrite it, but to acknowledge the quiet truth that evidence can feel almost human, even when it cannot speak. And though the ledger of history would close neatly, something warm stayed behind, not resolved, not erased, merely understood enough to continue. He walked back into the corridor without ceremony. The library lights hummed overhead, faint electrical breath replacing the stillness he had left behind. The brass key remained in his pocket now, warm against the fabric as if memory could generate heat. He did not hurry, but his steps carried purpose. 20 years had not dulled his understanding, only sharpened it into a quieter shape. The lower-level storage wing awaited him, unchanged in blueprint, changed in everything else. New staff, new catalog systems, renovations layered over the old foundation, but the cabinet room remained. Its walls were original, pale, industrial, textured with paint older than Lyra's final entry. He paused outside its door. The scent here differed from the archival room upstairs, less paper, more concrete, temperature maintained for preservation. He had stood at this threshold once before, younger, ready to prove consistency. He had believed then that history was a set of boxes one could open and align. Today, he understood what Lyra had tried to express. Some things remain whole not through division, but through restraint. The key eased into the lock without hesitation. It turned with a muted click, releasing air that felt fractionally cooler. He entered. Rows of steel cabinets lined the space. Each drawer held records of items waiting for formal verification, some anonymous, some clear, all part of a quiet continuum. He made his way to the far section, third row, seventh cabinet, the one she had accessed. Its ledger still bore her signature, a small checkmark beside her name, dated the day before her final recording. That checkmark had not faded. Ink had outlasted its writer. Drawer 4 required the key. He inserted it, turned, and slid the drawer out. Papers shifted, labels whispered against one another. A single wooden box sat centered, unassuming, no ornament. Lyra had noted its existence but not its origin. He lifted it gently, aware of the simplicity that often accompanies significance. The lid opened without resistance. Inside lay a violin bridge, unmistakably crafted, aged without damage. Along its edge, an inscription. H+L, not engraved professionally, but carefully, like initials carved before an object was passed between two people. He did not smile, but understanding settled. Lyra's trust, her calm, the open photograph, all of it pointed not to fear but to preservation. History here was not contested but shared. The artifact had not been donated to the library, it had been given to Lyra. A personal gift with familial or intimate resonance, not meant for public display. He lifted the bridge only high enough to study it. It bore marks of use, not neglect. Music had flowed through it. Lyra's violin sketch in her notebook was no technical drawing but remembrance. Lines of connection, not classification. He replaced it exactly as found. Precision mattered. The original investigation, 2 decades earlier, had treated the item as institutional property, a rare piece, unregistered, potentially linked to donor disputes. But Lyra had known what it was and who it belonged to. Not stolen, not misplaced, simply kept where it could remain whole. A soft scrape echoed behind him. The cabinet door settled from a previous shift, nothing more. He remained still until the quiet stabilized again. Cabinet rooms could feel watchful, not from malice but from accumulation, so many items, so many hands, so many years. He looked at the ledger sheet attached to the drawer. A single additional signature appeared below hers, small, angled, unfamiliar. No date, no clearance number. The investigator traced the line with his eyes. Initials only, J.D. He did not need to speak the name out loud to recognize it. Assistant historian, present during that period, assigned to the same collection review. Their interactions had been brief in meetings, polite in corridors. No record ever suggested conflict, only partnership. The case at the time had assumed dispute, 2 archivists, 1 rare item, divergent permissions. Yet nothing in Lyra's expression, diary, or recordings carried tension. The library board had acted cautiously, sealing the room to avoid internal questions, filing the matter to avoid external scrutiny. But none of that aligned with Lyra's work or voice. The clue, small but sharp, initials placed without authority. J.D. had accessed the drawer after Lyra, not before. He had not taken anything. He had merely acknowledged something, a silent condolences signature, a witness mark, acceptance in ink. The investigator closed the drawer and stepped back. The truth was neither dramatic nor hidden. 2 individuals shared a personal artifact with lineage, music, memory. Lyra logged it not for claim but for safekeeping. J.D. marked it only to confirm it remained untouched. That was the secret, preservation through quiet agreement. No feud, no betrayal, no vanished evidence. Only an object of shared meaning, left unpublicized because some parts of history are not meant for division. He turned off the cabinet light. The metallic scent returned as darkness reset the room. The case, once treated as unsolved, was simply unfinished, paused, not because of fault but because of reverence. He walked back toward the staircase, each step soft. The hallway lights flickered with timed regulation, not ominous, just mechanical. He thought of Lyra's photograph again, the candid half-turn of her face, the ease in her eyes. Trust, not secrecy. Upstairs, the archivist on duty glanced up but did not speak. He nodded once, a neutral acknowledgement. Some silences did not require disturbance. He returned to the sealed room and placed the brass key beside the portfolio. His work did not involve reclassification, only recording clarity. Dust shifted with his motion, but nothing unsettled. The air tasted the same: paper, quiet, continuity. He made a final note in the logbook, not dramatic, just specific. Item remains with personal provenance. No division required. Words exact and sufficient. He closed the log gently. Outside the window, afternoon leaned into pale evening. Light thinned across shelves and pages. He stood in it, not nostalgic, not mournful, simply aware. The unresolved element arrived then, not as shock but recognition. The letter's sentence was not coded philosophy but simple instruction. Items of shared history are not meant to be divided. The artifact was never library property. It was Lyra's connection to another life, another set of initials she did not document because documentation was secondary to meaning. For all the institution systems, all the labeled rows, all the carbon copies, the truest archive lay in what 2 people had chosen not to categorize. That was the quiet twist, logical but weighted. Some truths remain intact precisely because they are not pursued into the open. He rested his hand on the table once more, not touching but acknowledging. Lyra belonged neither to a closed file nor a tragic footnote, but to a continuum of sound and shared memory. The violin bridge upstairs, still angled in its aged box, had carried more than tone, it carried agreement. He looked around the room a last time. The dust continued its slow descent. Papers remained aligned. The locker stayed closed, not as concealment but conclusion. He walked out without ceremony, allowing the door to seal behind him. Justice, if it applied here at all, was not a verdict but a quiet ledger correction, a name, a date, a context restored. Mechanical in method, human in intent. At the end of the corridor he paused. The evening air through the glass held no answer, no closure, just a calm stretch of city dusk. Lyra's presence lingered not as a ghost but as a clear note in a long composition, heard only when silence allowed. He moved on, steady, unhurried, leaving the archive exactly as it had required. Intact, echo without echoing, trace without disturbance. Yet something in him remained, not regret, not relief, simply the understanding that even when logic is clean, memory can still feel warm. Evening deepened across the library's facade, a slow descent of muted blue into quiet gray. Streetlights blinked alive along the sidewalk, their glow flattening shadows into long, disciplined lines. The investigator stepped outdoors for a moment, letting the crisp air clear the paper scent from his lungs. He did not need distance, only adjustment, the shift from the suspended world of archives back into a city that never paused long enough to understand what waited beneath its history. He looked at the building's stone exterior. Same corners, same windows, same understated presence. 2 decades had moved without altering its composure. The world outside changed people rapidly. Paper changed them slowly. Lyra, he thought, belonged to the latter. He re-entered not to reopen investigation but to close the circle properly. Back to the sealed room not as detective but as recorder. The corridor welcomed him with soft lamplight. Someone had polished the floor recently, his reflection stretched in pale form as he walked. He paused near the stairwell, hand resting on the rail, gaze dropped not out of contemplation but habit, careful movement, deliberate steps, catalogued thoughts. He reached the room again, keyless now. The door stayed unlocked, not from oversight but resolution. The brass key sat where he had placed it earlier, small, unassuming, final. The locker remained closed, its contents stable in their definition. The cassette tape lay beside the player, no longer playing, no longer asking to be understood. He stood near the center of the room, the same space Lyra once occupied. She had arranged the room with the precision of someone who respected order without being consumed by it. Her notes bore no distress, her tape no urgency. She documented because truth mattered to her, but she withheld because meaning mattered more. He examined the portfolio one last time, not opening it. There was no need. Every detail had been understood in quiet increments, her sketches, her code of numbering, the placement beneath shelf 3. Nothing hidden, nothing sensational, only intention. His pen hovered over the official addendum file. The language required neutrality. No speculation, no sentiment, no narrative. Institutional phrasing guided his hand. Object identified as personal artifact held with mutual consent. No external claim. File closed with provenance intact. That was all. It fit the structure, met the standard, satisfied the archive. But it did not encompass the human portion. The unspoken agreement between Lyra and J.D., that part remained absent from record because records could not house the weight of trust. He glanced once more at the candid photograph he had set aside earlier. Lyra mid-turn, eyes lit not by flash but by recognition. Whoever held the camera, she had known them well enough to be unguarded. The softness there was not vulnerability but familiarity. Her death had been sudden, not violent, not scenic, simply a fault of time and physical fragility, a detail often forgotten because investigations tend to hunt for cause beyond nature. That absence of wrongdoing had frustrated the young him. Now, it grounded the older one. He slid the photograph back into its folder. The snap of the elastic band closing was gentle, barely audible. A draft crossed the room when the ventilation cycled. Dust lifted again in minute spirals, settling on the locker paint like faint snowfall. These motes had traveled years inside controlled air, moving only when granted permission. Evidence, too, had moved that way, held, suspended, then acknowledged with care. He stepped toward the door. The room no longer required him. What it held was preserved, not pursued. Yet he paused, a small instinct, not hesitation but reflection. The letter's single line returned, soft in memory. Items of shared history are not meant to be divided. Not a warning, not a pledge, a truth. Lyra had carried heritage, and instead of fragmenting it for academic display, she allowed it to remain whole. It had been entrusted, not abandoned. He reached for the light switch. Shadows folded gently over the shelves, the desk, the locker, nothing ominous, nothing concealed. Darkness here felt archival, not empty. He stepped out and closed the door. The latch clicked without echo. In the hallway, sound returned in small doses. The hum of ceiling fixtures, the soft thud of distant books reshelved, the faint elevator bell. The world resumed its rhythm. He went to the administrative counter, placed the updated file in the outgoing review box, and signed the ledger beneath the last recorded entry. 2 signatures now defined the case: Lyra's log date and his correction of context. No confrontation between them, just continuity. He exited through the staff entrance, nodding to the night guard who responded with a simple lift of hand. No questions passed between them. He carried no box, no photo, no classified item. All remained where they belonged. Outside, Chicago's winter wind pressed lightly across his shoulders. The city seemed both immense and muted, its noise softened by distance and hour. He waited at the curb for the crosswalk light, not impatient, simply still. A bus rolled past, windows coated with breath fog. A violinist played faintly around the corner, unamplified, barely audible, but steady. The tone held no flourish, only calm persistence. He stood and listened just long enough to register the shape of sound. Not sorrow, not triumph, simply continuation. Music that did not demand audience yet carried presence. Lyra would have understood that. He crossed when the signal changed. The case, if definition applied, was complete in its logic. No missing culprit, no fractured motive, no hidden violence. Only an artifact that belonged to 2 people and remained with neither in the end, preserved instead by circumstance and quiet duty. Justice, he thought, was often imagined as decisive action, final stamp, clear declaration. But there existed another version, quieter, methodical, respectful. A justice that did not rearrange the past to satisfy narrative, but allowed it to remain whole, dignity intact. He walked toward the train line, city lights fading into linear glow. The evening felt neither heavy nor resolved, just balanced. He glanced once over his shoulder at the building he had left. It stood in the same dignified silence, its windows dim, its archives at rest. Inside, the violin bridge waited in its wooden box, not for claim but for memory. No alarms, no headlines, no reopened investigation. Just 2 initials, connected across time, preserved without division. He boarded his train without hurry and sat by the window. The tracks hummed beneath him, a steady metallic pulse. The city slid past in measured frames, street corner, lamp post, upper windows, blank sky. He did not close his eyes. Instead, he allowed the quiet recognition to settle, that some mysteries are only mysterious because they remain intact, not because they resist explanation. He folded his coat, rested his hands, and let the rhythm of metal on metal escort him into night. Truth, in this instance, had not shattered anything. It had not even shifted the ground. It had only clarified a line of history that asked nothing from anyone except to remain whole. And though his work was complete, something lingered not unfinished, not insistent, just softly present. A note held in the air after the bow lifts, sustained not by force, but by memory. Not resolved, not erased, simply there.